Hi, everybody. I'm Matt.
And I'm Steve.
And this is Marvel Reread Club. Hi, everybody. Welcome back to episode 102. We've been keeping track of the episode count recently just because we've been just hovering around a monumentous number. But how are you, Steve?
I am doing fine. I am done with my 2.5-week sprint leading up to our empty nesterhood. We got our daughter successfully deposited in Manhattan on Saturday. And yeah, so, she is now living in New York.
I guess we probably, you sent me a picture of the view out her window, which has a water tower right outside of it. As Marvel Comics artists always like to include water towers when they draw the city. And I had at one point sent you an interesting thing someone had posted online of the proper way to draw a New York City water tower. And you don't space the bands evenly. You have them get closer and closer together as you get to the bottom, because that's the way water pressure works, that there's more and more pressure as you go down the tank. And you were pointing out that, yes, this water tower out her window looks like it. I was saying, we should post a picture of the water tower outside her window. But I suppose there might be some crazies out there who could triangulate the view from out her window and figure out where she is.
I don't know. Well, anyway, one way or the other. So she's got a fantastic view out of her window. She's excited, and we are adjusting to life as parents with a kid in college.
Yes.
So another thing that is relevant to Marvel Comics in general, although not the period we're talking about in particular, is Amy and I just finished watching the recent Shogun miniseries, the new one that just came out. And one of the things that I realized is, the other Shogun miniseries had been in 1980, and the female protagonist in this is named Mariko. And yes, exactly. And now you're starting to see what I'm what I'm getting at, aren't you?
Yes.
That in X-Men comics in the early 80s, Logan ended up engaged to a high-class Japanese woman named Mariko, and it always seemed a little bit weird. And now I'm looking at it and just looking at the character John Blackthorne and the character Mariko in the miniseries. I'm like, oh, well, that's clearly what this was getting at. Anyway, like I said, not relevant to the era of comics we're talking about right now, but sort of a revelation that I had about the comic books of our youth.
Yes. Wow. Yeah, that's interesting. That's fascinating. Okay.
Yeah. All right. How about I start with Fantastic Four? Oh, well, before I do, I forgot to ask about your family.
Oh, my family. They're long dead.
Oh, dark.
Okay. No, my family is doing great. We everything is going well. Well, Jack you knew this when we recorded our last episode. Jack was sick on his first day of school, which was a shame, but he has been well since then. He had his first baseball game on Saturday, and he started things off with a 2 RBI single, and then got a 1 RBI triple, and then at the end of the game, I was like, oh, Jack's probably going to get the game ball, because he knocked in 3 of the 8 runs and then scored a run himself. And he also scored a key out when he was fielding third base. And then at the end, the coach said, I think the game ball should go to Jack. Or wait, no, who hit that line drive? No, Miles. Give it to Miles. And I'm like, that's not nice. Don't announce that a kid is getting the team ball and then change your mind and give it to another kid. So anyway, but Jack should have gotten the game ball. He was the superstar of that game. He knocked in 3 of the 8 runs and scored another one himself. So everything's going great. My daughter is auditioning today for a part in Newsies, the musical.
Oh, nice.
I hope she gets a good part, and everything is going well.
Yeah, I believe that Newsies was Alexa's first Broadway musical. Not my daughter, Alexa. I think that was her first musical she saw on Broadway.
Yes,
okay.
We took her to it.
Oh, did you?
Yes.
Oh, I didn't remember that.
Yep.
I was there. Was I there? I was there too. Okay. Well,
yep.
There you go. My memory is not not so good. So let us get into this. So, world's greatest comic magazine, Fantastic Four, the Dismal Dregs of Defeat. And we see on the cover that the Fantastic Four plus Wyatt Wingfoot are all looking very dejected and defeated, while a triumphant Doctor Doom hovers in the background, pointing at them menacingly. Previously in the story, Doctor Doom has been able to steal the Silver Surfer's cosmic power. I don't think they're really calling it the power cosmic yet. At least they're not in this issue, but that's how I know it, so I'm going to refer to it as the power cosmic. And Doctor Doom is now going to fulfill his lifelong dream of destroying Reed Richards and everything he loves.
Sort of.
Well, I mean, that's his intention.
That's what he claims his intention is. Yes, we will see if he actually does it.
That is his stated intention at the beginning, indeed. He starts out by causing freak thunderstorms and creating apparitions of himself in those thunderstorms just to freak the Fantastic Four out. Reed is trying to convince everybody that it was just some kind of freak illusion or something like that, like a trick of the eye. Ben seems to be the most freaked out by this. Oh, and by the way, this is the Fantastic 3, since Johnny is still teleporting with Lockjaw and Wyatt Wingfoot. Doctor Doom is, now planning on going and actually finishing the job. He flies out from Latveria on the Silver Surfer's surfboard. Thing, meanwhile, is apparently still freaked out by what he saw earlier. He is sitting in a dark room reading ghost stories when Mr. Fantastic comes up behind him, touches him on the shoulder, and Thing freaks out. It's a funny line after he realizes what's going on. He says to Reed, "Who's jumpy? I was just practicing my isometric panic lessons," which is a good Ben Grimm line. So Reed and Sue say that they're heading off to some cottage that they've rented in one of the Hamptons in order to, try to regain some of that honeymoon feeling. And that is, right after they leave is when Doctor Doom attacks. So the only one who's there is Thing. So we've got an admirable battle by the Thing against the cosmically powered Doctor Doom.
So, of course, the whole problem with this issue is, how do you show somebody battling an omnipotent villain? We just had the same problem in Captain America when the Red Skull had the Cosmic Cube, and now we've got a similar problem here with Doctor Doom having the power cosmic. And they make it clear that essentially Doctor Doom could just blink his eye and make Ben Grimm wink out of existence, and yet he is... they are getting in a fist fight. They are doing all sorts of things that presumably he wouldn't need to do. Finally, he just looks at Ben Grimm and turns him into an immobile statue. And that is how he is using the power cosmic. If the Silver Surfer could have done that, I don't know why he hasn't done that to Ben Grimm in their various fights. While reading this comic, I kept thinking of Tom the Dancing Bug's Godman comics. Ruben Bowling does a comic called Tom the Dancing Bug, and one of his recurring characters is Godman, the superhero who is God. And he always has to get in these fights where his omnipotent powers, are insufficient in some way. And it's just a running joke on having overpowered heroes. OP, as my son would say, as they say in his video game YouTube videos. But it's a problem in this issue, as it was in that Captain America issue. But in both cases, you just have to go it amuses me to not use my full power against you.
Yeah. So Doctor Doom, he says, instantaneously, the vibration rate of your body is slowed down to a standstill. Your hideous human limbs will grow heavier until you can barely support your own weight. What he's describing there actually is just making him extremely cold. Slowing down the vibrations of your body is just making you cold. But one way or the other, yes, that would work too. Thing is basically frozen. At that moment, Lockjaw, Johnny, and Wyatt all reappear in the Baxter building as they've been jumping from planet to planet and possibly dimension to dimension. Johnny is upset. He's not sure what's going on. Wyatt, of course, has the level head and says, you know what? Lockjaw must have done this for a reason. And Johnny discovers that there's a big hole that's been blown in the side of the Baxter building. We see that Reed and Sue are in their cottage, and Reed is unable to pay attention to Sue without getting distracted by his tinkering on his various technological stuff, which apparently he brought with him to this cottage. And they're both wearing their Fantastic Four uniforms, of course, while they're on what's supposed to be a romantic getaway. But, you know, that's what these folks do.
What do they say? Don't dress for the time you're actually spending with your wife. Dress for the time you wish you were spending with your wife. Something like that.
How long have you been married? Because that seems... So, Dr. Doom shows up and attacks them. He is able to immobilize both of them, at least for a little bit. They have a really nice battle of Mr. Fantastic and primarily against Dr. Doom. Johnny figures out that that's where Dr. Doom must have gone, so he flies away from the Baxter building. Well, first he tells Wyatt where to find a gizmo that will be able to unfreeze Ben, and then, having given him those instructions, heads off to the Hamptons to back up Reed and Sue. Johnny is being pretty heroic here. He's saying, look, I'm the expendable one in this case. I will go and, face the most danger and possibly get myself killed to buy you guys some time. And, of course, Reed and Sue don't want to take this offer, but they end up having to do so anyway. So Dr. Doom is able to freeze Johnny, which, as I said, is basically the same thing that they described him doing to Ben, although he didn't turn frosty. And then Johnny is able, though, to just sort of expend the rest of his heat to go ahead and kind of melt himself and kind of explode and destroy this house that they were renting in the Hamptons. So I'm sure that people are really happy to rent to Reed and Sue Richards because, of course, nothing will ever happen to their property while they're staying there.
And if you go back, I think 3 issues, Alicia had property in the Hamptons that was destroyed by the Power Cosmic, wielded by someone else.
Yes, include Alicia in that list of people you do not want to rent to. So, now on page 18 is another one of those Marvel Method moments, because what we see on the page is that Johnny essentially is able to blow up this cottage while Reed and Sue are outside. And then Reed says, even though we do not see Johnny anywhere on this page, Reed says, "Fly away, Johnny. Take cover till your flame returns to full strength. We'll find some way to hold them off till you return." And then from off panel, Johnny says, "Okay, leader man, but take good care of my sis till then, you hear?" But we don't see any of that. And in comics, that's the kind of stuff you were supposed to see. And in the next page, Johnny shows up seemingly out of the rubble that he had just caused 2 pages earlier. I do not know whether Stan misunderstood what Jack was doing here with the storytelling, or whether he thought that for some reason it was better to claim that Johnny had gone off somewhere to rest up for a moment. I don't know, but I do find that's another little artifact of the Marvel Method as far as I can tell.
Yeah, it did seem like Stan was trying to contradict Jack in some way.
Yes. So Wyatt has successfully unfrozen Ben, and the two of them show up on one of their little flying motorcycle things. Wyatt grabs this weapon, an anti-grav disruptor, that seems to actually reverse gravity as far as I can tell from what we're seeing on the page. A whole bunch of rubble flies up from the already destroyed cottage. There is no rebuilding at this point. Then Reed is just like, look, Doom is omnipotent. There's nothing we can do. Fighting him further is pointless. It's not going to do anything. And the rest of the Fantastic Four can't believe it, but this works in their favor because Doom is like, haha, you feel defeated. Now, instead of just destroying you, I'll let you wallow in your defeat for a while, knowing that I shall return at some moment to destroy you all, and you can just let that sword of Damocles hang over your head, basically.
And then he flies off to do what? His only goal in life was to defeat the Fantastic Four. He has achieved it. What is next? What else is there to do? There was one other previous episode where it seemed like he had defeated the Fantastic Four and it was time to move on and do something else, and he demanded a seat in Kennedy's cabinet. Is that what he is going to do here? Is he off to get himself a cabinet position?
I think I understood that he was off to essentially conquer the whole world at this point, because now with his cosmic power, he has more ability to do something like that. That's how I read it. But yes, there's another issue we will be discussing this month where I will refer to the line from the second Austin Powers movie where Dr. Evil has some kind of death trap for Austin Powers. And Scott Evil's like, well, wait, what? Why don't I just go get a gun? What is Pop? Kill him right now. It'll be fun. It'll be a father-son thing. He's like, you just don't get it, Scott. So this is Dr. Evil right here with that. He's just like, no. I'm not just gonna, shoot you in the head. This is, I've got some other stuff I'm gonna do. Always a bad decision from any baddie, but there we go. So a fun, action-packed issue. As you said, there is the conceptual problem of this guy has power that rivals that of Galactus. And so, but unlike Galactus, who just considers these to be just gnats that are in his way and not even really worth trying to track down and kill, these are the people that Doctor Doom has hated for since at least college. So doesn't really make much sense, but there's a lot of fun action and fighting in this issue.
And certainly the stakes cannot feel higher. This feels like one of the most dire issues of Fantastic Four ever. Like, it feels like, the heroes are really up against it. And all of our storylines from the last 20 issues are coming together here. And then that's going to mount even more so next issue when, spoiler alert, the Inhumans finally get freed. But it really feels like this is sort of a culmination of the 58 issues that have led up to this. And it is a harrowing story. It is fun to read, but it's got this Tom the Dancing Bug Godman problem to it, which is the one thing plaguing the issue. It's interesting that when Johnny and White Wingfoot and Lockjaw teleport in, there's no mention that they've teleported to be reunited with Fantastic Four before, in Fantastic Four Annual number 4. Often, the Fantastic Four and other comics often seem like they're loath to mention the annuals, because they're like, well, maybe people didn't get the annual, so maybe we shouldn't acknowledge that annual happened, even when they were major stories, like Namor invading the surface world or whatever. I think that they never explicitly mention that in other stories.
That's a good point. No one has ever talked about, hey, remember that time that Namor conquered the Earth for a hot second? Yeah, no, it's like everyone forgets.
And indeed, there have been times when people are like, why are you acting that way? Don't you remember when Namor tried to conquer the Earth? Like, have you all forgotten? And I should say that there is a letter from Carrie Burkett in the letters page, who would go on to become a major writer at the Distinguished Competition over at DC Comics.
I did not realize that. Okay, so a fantastic issue. Lee and Kirby at the peak of their game.
Lee and Kirby and Sinnott at the top of their game. Absolutely gorgeously inked issue by Sinnott.
And here I am, the inker, shortchanging the inker. I apologize. Yes, and there actually were a couple of in particular panels in here where I was noticing just Sinnott's beautiful line work while I was reading it a little bit ago. But I forgot to mention that here.
We don't always need to mention the inker, but when the inker does a particularly gorgeous job, as with this issue. Okay, let's go ahead and move on to Strange Tales number 152, featuring Nick Fury, Agent of S.H.I.E.L.D., and Doctor Strange, who now get co-equal billing on the cover, and indeed it's an all Doctor Strange cover, as he goes up against Umar into the Dimension of Death. Nice Bill Everett cover for Bill Everett's final issue on this book. It's nice he gets to do the cover on his final issue before Marie Severin takes over next issue. But first, before we deal with Doctor Strange, let's deal with Nick Fury, Agent of S.H.I.E.L.D. The power of S.H.I.E.L.D. And Artie Simek goes full Simek on the power of S.H.I.E.L.D., doing his Simek effect on every inch of the letters in power. So, script, Smilin' Stanley, layouts, Jolly Jack Kirby, artwork, jaunty Jim Steranko, lettering, adorable Artie Simek, all of whom agree on this one, Deathless Credo, don't yield, back S.H.I.E.L.D. So Kirby is still getting layout credit, but the art feels more and more every issue like it is pure Steranko. This splash page is gorgeous. It is Nick Fury is flying his plane upside down and with his hair hanging off his head as he dangles upside down in his plane. And this does not look even the remotely slightest bit like Kirby. This looks like pure Steranko. And his inks, Steranko's inking, is just gorgeous. The fluidity of his paintbrush is just gorgeous.
Especially Nick Fury's knuckles and fingers as he is gripping the joystick or whatever you would call it, holding on for, with every ounce that he has. Just the detail in there. You can see the tendons in the first joint of the finger. You can see some shading where Steranko adds a little bit, breaks up the blacks there in a way that emphasizes the curvature of the fingers there. It really, those hands just get across the white-knuckled moment that we're in.
Yes, very much so. So then we cut to a gorgeous second page where we see Fury flying upside down, remember he was about to be killed by his own men. At the end of last issue, he realizes that he is flying the overkill horn. We then cut to, in S.H.I.E.L.D., Sitwell and Gabe Jones have to discuss whether or not to shoot Fury down. Sitwell agrees he has to shoot Fury down. Meanwhile, Hydra is meeting in Carnopolis, and the Supreme Hydra has been in disguise as Don Caballero and decides he no longer wants to be in disguise as Don Caballero. He now wants to go into disguise as an Arabic character named Emir Ali Bey and takes off his Don Caballero suit and puts on his Emir Ali Bey suit, but it's made clear that neither of this is what he actually looks like.
I will put in here that, as we've talked about, we've now reached the era that I have not read previously. I am assuming that we are eventually going to find out that his actual identity is Baron von Strucker.
Indeed we will, but that has not happened yet.
Is there a Von in there, or is it just Baron Strucker?
I don't remember.
Okay. Anyway, one way or the other. Strucker.
Anyway, Fury eventually figures out how to ditch the plane and destroy the overkill horn. He is picked up by a S.H.I.E.L.D. submarine. He sends the overkill horn crashing into Carnopolis, destroys Carnopolis, and the whole issue seemingly wraps up on page 8. We cut to a little bit of Dum-Dum in the hospital. Fury, however, does not go to the hospital. Fury is now over in the Suez Canal, where he finds out that the daughter of the former Supreme Hydra, the girl who was the star of the previous Hydra epic, has been kidnapped by Hydra, and he, with his shirt off, has to go rescue her. He's a super spy at this point, but he's still dressing like Sergeant Fury, where he's got the green pants, shirtless with huge bandoliers of bullets, and a massive machine gun as he goes and rescues her. But then, I guess this sort of wraps up. He rescues her and is mopping up and reports back to Sitwell, who is with all the Hydra bigwigs. And then Sitwell decides he wants to be like Fury and tries to smoke a cigar, and it just starts coughing uncontrollably, because he's a lightweight who can't smoke. Remember, kids, practice your smoking so that you don't embarrass yourself in front of other people. So that is the end of the S.H.I.E.L.D. story. I think it's a messy story. It's all over the map. I couldn't exactly follow how Fury got out of, like, Sitwell says, we're going to shoot him down, and then next thing you know, everything's fine, and I couldn't exactly follow how that happened. But it's just absolutely gorgeous art, penciling and inking from Steranko, and a fun story, even if it was a little hard to follow.
Yeah, that was one of the reasons why I chose Fantastic Four, is I was like, these two stories in Strange Tales, I'm not quite sure I would be as adept at summarizing them. No. So I'm going to leave that up to Matt. A couple of my observations here, other than what I've already said. So when Fury is able to extract himself from the plane with the overkill horn, he then programs it, as you said, to go and crash into Carnopolis and destroys the entire thing. So you figure this is a so-called dead city, and all it has in it is Hydra, who are all evil, who are trying to take over the world. But I'm assuming that this would be considered like a World Heritage Site.
Yeah.
This is priceless antiquities, relics of antiquity have just been utterly destroyed here. So, that's fun.
Nick Fury doesn't get a chance to say, I'm sure those panty-waists at UNESCO probably think this is a World Heritage Site, but it's gotta be destroyed, Pilgrim.
Yeah, that's that. I don't even know if you would have thought that. It's like, oh well, it took care of Hydra. It's like, oh yeah, some old crap just got destroyed. That's fine. No worse than all the pre-condemned buildings that always get destroyed in New York City.
Yeah.
So when they are taking the submarine through the Suez Canal, I saw this, and smarty pants that I am, I was like, well, they wouldn't be able to get very far being underwater because the locks that raise you up and lower you down in a canal, he's going to have to wait for those just the same as the other ships. So, yeah. So I was going to post something about this on our social media, and then before I did that, I was like, wait a minute, let me just double check something first. And indeed, before I went all, joy kill McSmarty pants on everybody, I found out that the Suez Canal actually is just a sea level ditch that has been dug in the area, as opposed to the Panama Canal, where it goes basically over some low mountains, and so you have to raise the boats up and then lower them back down. Here, it's just a ditch that is at sea level. Now, another thing that I found while doing this research is that apparently this is used by flat earthers as evidence that the earth is not round. Because it's all at sea level. And if the earth really had the curvature that that's quote unquote science claims it does, then that water would be flowing downhill like it would down any sort of incline. QED, checkmate. Yeah, so that's upsetting.
Yes.
Let's see. So after they take care of the overkill horn, at one point, when we get the establishing shot of the helicarrier with the planes flying around it, there is a speech balloon that says, "A splendid day's work. By the time Hydra can build another such horn, the weapon will have become obsolete." And I'm like, that's just sort of hanging out there. What do you mean obsolete? Like, how is it not gonna... I don't know. I mean, it's just one of those throw-off lines that takes care of things, but it just sort of stuck out to me. And the last thing I'll say is, have you ever tried to smoke a cigar, Matt?
I never have, no.
I have once, and I've never smoked a cigarette. I've always been embarrassed of the idea of smoking a joint in front of people and hacking and just getting laughed at. Like, that's not something that's always something I've been like, yeah, I don't kind of want to do that. So when I smoked a cigar, it was at a poker game that a neighbor of mine was holding on his front porch, and I was like, yeah, sure, why not? I'm playing poker, let's go ahead and give this a try. And I followed the rules. You don't breathe in, you just puff it into your mouth, and I found it completely unrewarding, and then my throat hurt for the next 2 to 3 weeks. So I was just like, yeah, no, that's not for me. That's not going to happen. But presumably Sitwell actually breathed it in here into his lungs, which is a really, really bad idea.
Yes.
All right. Okay. So that's it. Let's move on to Doctor Strange.
Yeah. I mean, I got to say, both Fantastic Four and S.H.I.E.L.D., harrowing. Harrowing is the word to describe them. It really feels like, how on earth are they going to get out of this? These are white knuckle issues. It feels like big stakes and exciting stuff to read. Although in both cases, I'm still not sure how they got out of that, but okay. Okay. So let's go ahead and move on to it. Doctor Strange into the dimension of death. Truly hath Stanley authored yon awesome epic. Verily hath Bill Everett such scenes depicted. And finally didst Artie Simek the lettering inscribe. So say we all.
And I will point out that death in the title there also is full Simek. It's not in a slightly different way. It looks more like it's quivering, but it's quivering on every linear inch of the outline, and has some other movement lines outside of it as well.
Yes, it looks like Shaky in the old Dick Tracy cartoon. So this is Bill Everett's final issue on this book, penciling, inking, and presumably co-plotting. And I think he has had an underrated run on the book. I think he had a completely thankless task of following up Steve Ditko, but he's done a pretty good job. He's introduced some interesting villains. I think Umar is a strong villain who will last many years, and it'd be kind of nice if Everett got to wrap up today, but instead this is just a middle chapter in the Umar story. We have Doctor Strange going between dimensions. Once again, space is rather, I guess this isn't space. I guess this is between dimensions, but it is rather busy behind him. He is attacked by various goons. This is a very simple issue. It is just him on his way to the Dark Dimension, being attacked by various goons, ectoplasmic goons. And that is the entire issue. Umar still hasn't figured out who he is. Umar is like, who is this guy? She, remember, was zonked away by her brother for many years and was not following what was going on. She is like, all right, I'm going to have to keep sending people after this guy. Says, but though the power of Umar is beyond all measure, still am I a female. Thus I shall crush the accursed human as only a woman can, with the matchless weapons of cunning and overwhelming guile. But that's not really true. She basically just sends some goons to go grab him and drag him over. She's not exactly engaging in an elaborate deception here.
Well, once she drags him over, she then feeds him a line of BS about something or other, and I think that's what's being referred to here. But I do notice that her brother Dormammu, his head is engulfed in flames, and it looks like her head is sticking through a circle of flame, like there's a sort of an oval or circular shaped flat piece, flat disc of flame that her head is stuck through. So sort of a reference to Dormammu, but you can get across visually that she is supposed to be she.
Yes. Yeah, I think because it wouldn't be fun to have two characters whose heads were engulfed in flames. So they sort of gave some second thoughts here. And it's like, no, the second time we do the head in flames, let's go ahead and have them be more discreet. So then she tries to trick him, but he doesn't really fall for it. She has to put some sort of whammy on him and eventually ends up exiling him to the area where the Mindless Ones are raging out of control, where Doctor Strange has dealt with the Mindless Ones before, but always on the safe side of the barrier, never from inside the barrier, so he is in trouble. And that is the end of this issue. That is the end of Bill Everett's run on this book. Next issue, we will have our first Marvel comic penciled by a woman, which I'm looking forward to. So this is, I think, a perfectly fine issue. What did you think of it?
I think it was fine. Nothing really remarkable in my mind. So just a couple of things I will point out incidentally. Page 8, panel 2 is, you talk about how Bill Everett is the most golden agey looking artist that Marvel has, even though, a lot of their artists had worked in the golden age of comics. But Everett really looks like more of what we think of as a golden age artist. And page 8, panel 2, with that close up on Strange's face, definitely looks that way.
Mm-hmm.
When Strange is trying to make it to the Dark Dimension, at one point he thinks to himself, but my first task is to break free and find Clea. Her safety is all important now and always. I'm like, haven't you guys met like twice?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, yes, I'm not saying that you shouldn't go and rescue her. I'm not saying that you haven't built some sort of bond in your short meetings, but now and always really jumps out at me as a little bit odd.
Sort of like when Thor was like, and thus ever the Avengers have stood against bad guys. I'm like, it's been 5 issues, dude. It's you guys just basically formed last week. What do you mean? Thus
Captain
ever?
America just joined last issue. What's going on? Yeah, and once again with some of the wording, you were talking about, oh, since I am a female, then I must do this way and that way. There, also, the last panel on page 9, Doctor Strange is saying to himself, and though she is but a female, the aura of her power seems to fill this very universe. Once again, all this stuff like, oh yeah, okay, audience, I know that she's a lady, so of course, you're assuming that she is going to be weak, but, even though she's a lady, she's still a really bad guy. Comes across a little bit like, yeah, no, we get it. We understand. But then I'm saying that from the 2020s.
Yes.
Not the 1960s.
Every time anybody refers to the 2020s, I always hear Sager and Evans sing in the year 2525.
Yep. If man is still alive.
That song has been stuck in my head through the entirety of the 2020s, and it will only get worse next year when it will actually be 2025.
Yeah, well, kind of like how in the end of 2020, well, actually, the end of 2019 and the end of 2020, the song, the Ramones song, I Want to Be Sedated, was just going through my head.
2020, 24 hours to go.
24 hours to go. I want to be sedated. So, anyway,
It always struck me as odd that you had just a little bit of it, but why Joe Biden didn't have lawn signs printed up in 2020 saying, Joe Biden, because hindsight is 2020. It always struck me as a missed opportunity.
Yes, that would have been clever. Okay, so let's move on to Tales of Suspense featuring Iron Man and Captain America. Cover says Into the Jaws of Death. It is an action isn't really quite the right word. It is a very dramatic and energetic cover drawn clearly by Colin, presumably inked by Jack Abel. And the Mandarin is in the background shooting his rings into the foreground, hitting what presumably is Tony in the face with his helmet off while he is chained up in a chamber here.
But then we read the book and realize this isn't Tony. This is Happy Hogan with his hair miscolored. This is it's
precisely
clearly colored as if this is the colorist of the cover clearly assumes this is Tony and has not read the book and has not realized this is actually Happy and he should have light brown hair.
Yes. Either that or they just said, well, we don't want people being like, oh, dude, there was a coloring problem on the cover of that issue. I don't want to buy it. So who knows? So Into the Jaws of Death, story Stan Lee, penciling Gene Colan, inking Frankie Giacoya, lettering Artie Simak. All the talent, yours for only 12 cents. Marvel does it again.
Yeah, so I would say the cover is probably Giacoya, not Abel. But we don't know.
Yeah, you're probably right. So, the Mandarin has captured Iron Man, or so he thinks. This is actually Happy in Iron Man's armor. Happy had gotten Iron Man's armor and gotten into it to try to convince people that Iron Man and Tony Stark are not the same person. Unfortunately, as has happened before in the Marvel Universe, somebody dresses up as a hero or pretends they are a hero, and some bad guy assumes that that is correct, and they are in trouble. This has happened with Flash Thompson dressing up as Spider-Man. This has happened with Foggy Nelson and Daredevil.
Yes.
So here it is once again. And of course, Happy doesn't know how to work the Iron Man armor as well, so he's not able to defend himself the way the real Iron Man would. Tony checks himself out of the hospital, goes to his factory. Nobody's seen him for a while because he's been, testifying before Congress and doing other stuff. We just see a little bit of his scientific genius as he walks by a room with some other folks inventing stuff. And they're like, oh, we've been having problems with the Framostat or whatever, the Knooter valve. And Tony just says, hey, try reversing the third stage cycle. That'll put you right back on track. They're like, oh my God, why didn't we ever think of that? Of course, that'll solve everything. So Tony then heads into his locked laboratory and builds himself a better Iron Man armor. Now, it looks exactly like the previous one. There's not a design change that's being made here in this case, I don't think. No. Not that I can see, at least, but it's supposed to be stronger, lighter, better, various things. So he then attaches himself to a test missile. He talks about how lucky it is that he is a weapons manufacturer, so he just has various missiles ready to be tested sitting around. So he's able to transport himself to somewhere near China. Granted, he drops in the ocean, and I think we've established that the Mandarin's castle is somewhere in the mountains of western China, but one way or the other, he's at least closer than he was from North America.
Yes.
The Mandarin has Happy as Iron Man down in a dungeon. Somehow he's gotten the helmet off of him and is trying to torture Happy, whom he thinks is Iron Man, into letting him know where the various weapon systems are. Now, you could think, oh, well, he doesn't know, but he probably does. But one way or the other, he's heroically refusing to cooperate while getting beat up and hurt by the Mandarin. Iron Man is able to make his way through mainland China to the Mandarin's fortress. As he gets to the entrance of the fortress, at one point, this is page 11, he says to himself, uh-oh, the Mandarin's no slouch when it comes to electrical weapons either. I broke an alarm circuit by walking between these posts. I'm actually bracketed by deadly beams of high voltage current. Once again, nerd alert here. I'm just going to point out that that is essentially man-made lightning bolts. And man-made lightning bolts are what I deal with all the time in the tubes that create the lasers that I deal with at the makerspace. So, and those are deadly beams of high voltage current through the nitrogen like we have in our air. So anyway, yeah, nerd alert. Iron Man is able to get by this, but meanwhile, Senator Byrd has, I don't know if he's really, but you could really say he's had a change of heart about Tony Stark, but he's having a back and forth with someone here. The other person says, Senator, it's almost election time. I suggest you end your investigation of Iron Man and of Tony Stark. After all, Iron Man is practically everyone's favorite hero, and Stark is mighty popular with the young men and the females of voting age. You can't afford to risk losing any votes. And Byrd says, Smith, I have a duty to the American public. I've got to do that duty whether the cause is popular or not. I'd rather lose an election than betray my ideals or my senatorial oath. And he says that the hearings will resume. So I guess I misspoke. He hasn't changed his mind. But this is just something where it seems that he is standing on principle, even if it's extremely unpopular. Now, whether you could say he's standing on principle or whether he's just got his ideological hobby horse that he is sitting on, that can be argued one way or the other. But this is supposed to come across as Senator Byrd is doing what he's doing because he's an honorable man who is doing his duty to his country, regardless of how it redounds to him, which adds a little bit of extra layer here to where he's not just like the Gary Shandling version of the character that was in Iron Man 2, who is just basically annoying,
which I point out in one of my books that it's quite ridiculous in Iron Man 2, where the Gary Shandling character is clearly in the right. Like, we should not allow, billionaires to fly around in their own armor, conducting their own foreign policy, and yet we're supposed to be booing and hissing him. And it's like, why are we booing and hissing him? And then later it turns out he's actually working for Hydra, so we're really supposed to boo and hiss him.
Right.
It was quite ridiculous.
I do find the second Iron Man movie as my least favorite movie in the, my least favorite Marvel movie, at least in phase 1, if not in the whole phase up through Endgame.
Yeah, I would agree.
Yeah, and that's one ingredient in that. But yeah, now at this point, basically, isn't this basically Elon Musk going and, turning on and off the GPS satellites in the Ukraine-Russia war and all sorts of stuff like that. I don't know if we want to leave that in there. Maybe we've got some Elon fanboys in our audience. So anyway, the real Iron Man makes it into the chamber where the fake Iron Man, Happy Hogan, is being tortured for information, and they will have that confrontation next issue. What do you have to say about this story that I have not yet said?
I think that Hogan and Giacoya are doing a good job. I think that it's very sort of standard Iron Man story where, he's having chest problems and has to make himself better armor and go face off to the bad guy. But having the bad guy having Happy in the armor is sort of an interesting twist. And as the recurring theme of this episode is harrowing, it's a fairly harrowing episode. And that's good. I'm worried for our heroes. So, that's the basic job of any comic book story, the basic job of really any story. Make us worried for our heroes, and I'm worried for our heroes. It's, they're in a tough spot. So, it's okay. The oddest thing about the issue is just that Happy is being held by the Mandarin, and Mandarin could be doing unspeakable things to him. And Tony is like, well, I'll need to go rescue him, but first I'll need armor, and I'll need slightly better armor. So let me go and do some experiments on the new armor. And it actually shows him with pencil and paper taking down notes about the new armor. Oh, metal withstands high heat pressure correctly. And I'm like, I don't know if you really have time to be, creating new armor and complete with a note-taking process. And, Happy is in the clutches of the Mandarin. So there's a certain lack of urgency in this issue, which is a little weird, especially given that the situation is rather harrowing. But other than that, I like the issue a lot.
Good. Okay, so let's move on to the second half of the issue. Captain America, Living Legend of World War II, the Blitzkrieg of Batok. Did I do the correct French R there? I think I did.
Okay.
So, we don't really have any lead up here. There is just a very, very quick backstory of I think it's Sharon Carter, isn't it? Has been kidnapped
It is Sharon Carter, but they don't call her that. She won't be called that for, I think, years still. She's just called Agent 13.
Okay. Agent 13, later to be called Sharon Carter, has been kidnapped, and they, being Batroc and Hydra, have let Captain America know in order to lure him into something. From what it seems like, Batroc has kidnapped Agent 13 and then offered her to Hydra as long as Batroc gets the chance to defeat Captain America first. The plot is a little bit odd and not important at all, because what we get in this issue is just non-stop hand-to-hand combat between Captain America and Batroc.
Hand to foot, as the case may be.
Shield to foot.
Yes.
Hand and shield to foot combat. One-on-one combat. The first 2 pages, the splash page and the second page, is a little bit weird because it looks like Captain America just walked right past 2 Hydra goons without ever even seeing that they were there. That could have been laid out a little bit better, but like I said, Kirby was getting to some other stuff, and I don't think he cared at that point. He's just like, let me get to this as quickly as I can. So, as I said, there's really not that much to summarize in here, unless I was going to say, and Batroc kicks him here and leaps over there, and Captain America does this. There's very little to say other than it's spectacular. Page 5, panel 1, is a panel that has been homaged many times over the years. It's a very powerful shot of Captain America punching Batroc from the left side of the panel to the right side of the panel. He's pretty much horizontal to the ground as he lands this massive blow, and it has been homaged by Gil Kane. I forget, I've seen people, put out, oh yeah, here are all the different times this thing's been homaged. So it is a great panel. The next panel, though, is the second time I'm going to reference Scott Evil here, and then the 2 Hydra goons who are there. One of them's like, only 1 shot! That's all it would take! The other one's like, no, we don't dare disobey our orders. We must bide our time. No matter what the outcome, Captain America cannot escape, and therefore, let us go and make sure the girl is still securely bound. So they have made some kind of deal with Batroc. So, but once again, hey, why don't I just get my gun and shoot him? Another fantastic panel on page 6, panel 3, of Batroc landing a double kick on Captain America's shield, and Captain America just absorbing what seems to be this massive blow from Batroc. Captain America is able to get the upper hand. Page 8 is just a 9-panel page of just mayhem between these two. And it's just fantastic. And Stan Lee mostly stays out of the way on this one. He has a caption up at the top that says, "The wise man knoweth when to speak and when to shutteth up. Sly Stan knows that no words of his can do justice to Jolly Jack's great action scenes. And so," and then it has all the stuff, which is probably just about the right amount of dialogue that this page needed. It probably needed something rather than just being completely silent, just because the style of Stan Lee's writing in these Marvel comics, as established, is it's a little more verbose than just letting this completely stand. But this time, not all the time, but this time, he knows to just sit down and let Jack do his thing.
Now, there was a couple issues ago, there was a Kirby issue that had a 9-panel grid, and you were like, is this the first Kirby 9-panel grid? And I said, no, there was a 9-panel grid running for Batroc. Well, this is the page I was thinking of, so maybe you were right and I was wrong, because I had remembered this 9-panel grid happening in the previous fight with Batroc, not here. So you may have been right that was the first Kirby 9-panel grid last month or 2 months ago.
I don't know that I was right, because as you're saying that, I'm thinking, wasn't there a 9-panel grid in the first issue of Hulk?
9-panel grid action sequence,
Ah, okay, I see what you're saying, yes. So, anyway, at some point, Batroc figures out that these guys in Hydra have betrayed him by trying to take their prisoner before Batroc has been able to defeat Captain America. So, Batroc teams up with Captain America to go and knock out the Hydra goons, and Batroc then says, okay, well, I'm out of here. Next time we meet, it shall be as enemies, basically. And that is it. And, we, of course, get lots of lovely Batroc over-the-top French accent stuff here. "You have earned the right to rescue her, mon ami. Quickly, we shall strike with the lightning speed." And it says, "Our little episode is over. Ovair. Yeah, it's fun. And like I said, just 10 or 11 or however many, just absolutely action-packed pages.
Yep. And just a tiny little done-in-one story where the last time there was Agent 13 and Batroc in a story, it took a lot longer to get things going and wrapped up. And this is a similar sort of situation with Daredevil this month, where John Romita had been on Daredevil and had a long Kazar story, and then we revisited Kazar this month, and it was dealt with done in one. And here we had a long Batroc Agent 13 story about a year ago, and here we revisited, but it's done in one this time.
Yes. Oh, yeah. So a couple other things I just took some screen captures on. I just want to mention. At one point, Captain America says to Batroc, "Who gave you your English lessons? Dr. Doom?" I'm like, Dr. Doom speaks way better English than this. On that panel with the double leg kick that I was talking about earlier, Batroc uses the expletive well, I'm not going to pronounce it right, I'm sure, but nom du chien. You were prepared for my charge. And I was like, that's one I've never heard of before. So I went and looked it up. And apparently it translates to like name of the dog. But essentially, it's just that it was originally the more supposedly blasphemous in the name of God. And so there are a few different versions of things where they substitute the name for God for something else in that particular phrase.
But then there's another point in this issue. He says nom de chien, name of a dog in French. But at another point in English, he says name of a name, he exclaims at one point.
So there you go. That's that. And like I said, there are apparently, as I saw when I looked this up, multiple different sort of substitutions for God in common usage, or at least in common usage at some point in the past. So that might be another. And, oh yeah, actually, that was the next thing I said. That's the next panel I have open is name of a name. Right, I'm looking right at that panel right now. I also finally looked up Zoutalor, one of those usual ones that doesn't really sound very French. Zoot does not sound French to me, but apparently Zoutalor can be translated basically as, well, damn. Zoot is basically damn, and allure means now or something like that. So or then, sorry, that's what it is, then. So it's like, damn them. Anyway, there we go. That is Tales of Suspense. I say overall a great, definitely worth my 12 cents.
Oh, yes. As they say at the beginning of the Iron Man issue, like, oh, that should be worth 12 cents. It's like, well, you don't even have to be worth 12 cents. You just have to be worth 6 cents, because we're going to have Captain America earning the other 6 cents of ours in the back of the book. And Captain America definitely earns his 6 cents.
I think that Iron Man could have been worth 0 cents in this issue, would have still been worth its 12 cents. Fortunately, it was not worth 0 cents, but Captain America just absolutely knocks it out of the park. All right.
Just amazing what they're able to get done in 10 pages for the Captain America story. Okay, let's go ahead and move on to our final book of January 1967, The Avengers, The Ultroids Attack. A truly terrible issue. We have just an awful cover. I think that Heck, I was never a big fan of, but we both have agreed that he started off stronger than he has been. I think he is in rapid decline at this point. This cover is just awful. The Ultroids look just awful. The Avengers, my God, Heck's addiction to walls full of machinery is just out of control, and I just can't stand it. I can't stand the way he draws walls full of machinery, which are taking up most of the cover, and I just think it's just a god-awful cover. And god-awful insides. The Ultroids Attack, edited by Stan the Man Lee, scripted by Roy the Boy Thomas, drawn by Don the One Heck, lettered by Sam the Sham Rosen. Have we had Roy Thomas called the Boy before? I guess it's sort of logical if it's Stan the Man to have Roy the Boy.
No, I do not remember having seen Roy the Boy. So that's probably the new one.
He probably complained.
Yeah, I would imagine so. Like, okay, I know I'm the new guy here, but I mean, come on.
Come on. So then, last issue I did with Captain America turning and whirling around in surprise at somebody calling his name. It turns out it was Scarlet Witch, or seemingly the Scarlet Witch, who was calling his name. And she has come, or seemingly has come, to tell him a story about how she was in her village with Quicksilver when they were talking to the Burgomeisters, which I guess is a hint
mayor.
As to what country they may have been in. Basically, mayor in certain Balkan countries. Quicksilver is very snappily dressed in a green suit with a purple cravat. He is very hip. Looks like Austin Powers. So then they are hanging out in town when suddenly an alien spacecraft lands. A big flying UFO lands. Quicksilver gets sucked up, and Scarlet Witch, according to the story she tells, decides to go to America and summon the Avengers to help rescue Quicksilver. Now, Black Widow has not been a member of the Avengers, but she sort of considers herself to be one, and shows up with Hawkeye to answer the summons, and they're like, does she belong here? And Hawkeye's like, I brought the Black Widow with me, Cap, because I think it's high time she was admitted to membership. And Captain America says, that's not for us to decide, Avenger. We'd have to call a special meeting to vote on it, and presumably order her to go capture the Hulk as part of some sort of hazing ritual. But then they decide there's no time to deal with it now. They have to go rescue Quicksilver. Although, of course, Hawkeye and Goliath almost get in a fight before they go, because that is the only way Heck knows to co-plot these issues, is to have them constantly get in fights. There's sort of a nice sequence on the final 4 panels of page 7 where it looks like for some reason they're in 2 Quinjets as they rocket across 4 panels on their way to... I mean, clearly they're not. You can see 4 of them in one of the jets.
Well, I disagree. I had actually taken a screenshot of these bottom 4 panels as something that was just a mess in my mind. You can't tell whether, as you were saying, you can't tell whether these are 2 different, and I don't think they've actually come up with the term Quinjet yet, but 2 different planes that are, one on top of the other, or whether... okay, well, here it is passing between the 4 panels, and then there it is actually shown in stasis in one of those 4 panels. And it's really unclear which one that is. The perspective really seems to change in odd ways from panel to panel for a little, what is it, diptych, triptych, what would it be, quadric? Like this. I do not like exactly what you're describing here. I do not think it was successful at all, personally.
You are totally right. I was totally wrong. This is god-awful. But, it was, I admired the ambition of it slightly, but the more you point out how bad it is, it's in fact very bad. So anyway, the Avengers land in the Vulcan village and see the UFO and find a way to get in through the tunnels underneath it. They find a gigantic computer named XR that is running the UFO. And then suddenly it turns out that they're like, oh yes, we have found where the aliens kidnapped the Burgomeister and kidnapped Quicksilver and kidnapped the Scarlet Witch. They're like, how can that be the Scarlet Witch in a little test tube there when we've got her right here with us? But then she turns into an alien and reveals that she is, well, I guess she's not an alien, she is an android. For I am but an android, as Captain America guessed, a mere invention of XR, created for the sole purpose of luring you into his trap, a trap from which you shall never escape. And then giant Ultroids appear and they fight the Avengers. In several very poorly drawn pages, they eventually end up kidnapping all of the Avengers except for Captain America and Black Widow, who now have the job of rescuing the Avengers. I guess bottom panel of page 19 just really looks like it was drawn by a 5-year-old kid. A lot of panels in this issue look like they were drawn by a 5-year-old kid. Just spectacularly bad. I think we've got 4 more issues of Don Heck after this. He seems to have entered into a downward spiral of awfulness, and certainly as co-plotter isn't any great shakes either. This is a very poorly written issue. This is a very poorly penciled issue. This is a very poorly inked issue. This is a terrible issue, in my opinion. What did you think of it, Steve?
Yeah, not really much better than you would say. There are a couple of things about the art that can recommend themselves on that final page. The image of the intelligent computer that is up on the screen in panel 2. I like some of the texturing on that. That's pretty cool looking. Although then there's some unexplained silhouetted kind of stuff here that makes it look like the lights just went out, which I'm assuming is just a, time saver for Don Heck here, but he could have pulled that off a lot better to where it would look like, oh, this is just a little stylistic thing, rather than looking like the lights just went out. So I know that Black Widow can currently walk up walls, but on page 18, panel 4, don't show her looking like she's just strolling along on the ground while she's walking on a 90-degree wall. That just absolutely destroys any suspension of disbelief I have, unless she's got some kind of gravity powers that actually is giving her gravity weighing down on that wall. But no, she's just got some kind of suction boots. The kind of core strength you would have to be able to pull that off is improbable.
Yes.
Also, art-wise, once again, since we're savaging the art in this issue, not undeservedly, I will go ahead and point out that page 14, panel 2, Cap is actually really, really nicely drawn there. Now, granted, he's mostly behind a shield, but he's well shaded, he's well inked, his position is great. It looks almost like something that was penciled by John Byrne. It's going to throw out there that, Don Heck does still have some talent in him there, even though we're not seeing very much of it right now. The sequence where Scarlet Witch turns into the android or morphs into her android self, she really looks like a Larry Lieber bug-eyed alien there. In my personal opinion. At one point when Hawkeye is trying to destroy the computer, he often refers to Captain America as Winghead. Well, unfortunately, he refers to him as Webhead by accident. And I was like, wait, what? I'm like, oh, okay, yeah, that must be what happened. Just, once again, Stan, it's not a good idea to both edit and to both write and edit your own books. That's not
Well, he's not writing this one. He's just editing it, so he should have caught it.
Oh, that is actually a very good point. So you don't even have that excuse.
Yes.
A forgettable issue.
Oh, yes, certainly this issue is completely forgotten in Avengers history. Never again do they fight the Ultroids or Ixar, as far as I remember. But completely forgettable, forgotten issue. I check my notes. Like every single issue, the Avengers almost kill each other before they go off on that week's adventure. I think, they could just hire an HR director to just have somebody have some sort of chain of complaint within the organization going I feel disrespected by Goliath. I am going to report it to HR rather than take out my deadly bow and arrow and point it at him and then have to have the rest of the team break it up again, as they do every issue.
Or they could unionize, and they could have a union rep that would,
One thing that unions do is they make sure an HR department is set up. So I think that yes, they definitely need a union, and one way or another, they need an HR director.
I was thinking of the old classic movie, The Pajama Game, where there's a dispute like that, and she's Doris Day is taking care of it. Okay, yes. So anyway, yeah, that's it. Overall, I mean, yes, The Avengers is a super dud. But other than that, this has been an episode of really good issues.
Yep. This has been some good stuff. Good Fantastic Four, good S.H.I.E.L.D., pretty good Doctor Strange, pretty good Iron Man, great Captain America, and god-awful Avengers. If you are reading along with the books as you listen to this podcast, hopefully you enjoyed reading these 4 books, or at least 3 of them.
Or at least it averaged out to you enjoying them.
Yes. On average, you enjoyed it.
I think that is it for me on this month. So unless you have anything else to say, I would like to tell everyone out there in podcast land, thank you once again for listening, and we will bring you more content, because that's what we are. They call it, that's content creators. That's the word these days, right? Isn't that what
content providers, content creators, something like that. IP generators. Okay, so thanks everybody for listening in. We will talk to you next time.
Yes, and we will generate you an IP address or something like that. All right, take care, everybody. Stay safe out there.
Bye.
Thanks for listening to Marvel Reread Club. Please subscribe to us wherever you get your podcasts. Your reviews and ratings are a great help and always appreciated. We love hearing from you. Go to MarvelRereadClub.com to find notes and join the discussion about this episode. We're also on Facebook and Instagram. See you next time.